welcome to my channel. I'm Amber, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my weekly reading wrap-up. So this week I DNF'd 2 books. I only finished 1 book, and I'm currently reading 2 books. So we've had a bit of a rough reading week. So let's just talk about the book that I DNF'd first, and that is Enter the Aardvark by Jessica Anthony. And this is about a Republican congressman who is deeply in denial about his sexuality, and one day he gets a stuffed aardvark, and he doesn't understand like why or who, and he's trying to get rid of it before it ruins his campaign, and his election possibilities. And then we're also seeing the perspective of the person who taxidermied the aardvark, and the perspective of the person who killed the aardvark. I feel like this is a combination of realizing that people didn't talk about the writing style and feeling like fairly kind of like put out about that, and then not liking the writing style. I don't like run-on sentences / streaming consciousness, whatever you want to call it. It's just my brain just can't handle that kind of writing. And like I read the one sentence which was a page and a half long, and I was like, what the hell? Why did nobody mention this? So like it just like I was like really just automatically just thrown out of the book, and I automatically was just like, I'm done. I can't function with that kind of writing style. It does not work. So like I will say that when I like browse through that, yes, it is really bad in a lot of places. Like this one again, like all the way, just like all the way, like that's one whole sentence right there. And I feel like sometimes that people want to make excuses and say that it's stream of consciousness because they want to say it, when they want to call Renaissance a style. And I'm just like, no, it feels like the sentences are just going nowhere fast. And I'm just like, what's the purpose? What's the point? I don't understand. It's just something that I will never be able to like understand how people can enjoy that. What are you getting out of it? I don't know. Actually, I can't get anything out of it. I can't even half the time comprehend what I'm reading because it's taking too long to get anywhere, for me personally. So for me, it was just a combination of feeling frustrated with the fact that nobody thought to bring up the fact that this book is told through run-on sentences. If you want to be nice, stream of consciousness style. So yeah, that was just a bit of a frustration, especially because I was really looking forward to that book. So like the fact that I was so excited about this book, and being combined with the fact that people didn't feel the need to talk about the fact that it was written that way, just really just like, yeah, I'm never going to be picking that book up again, and I'm just very disappointed and kind of slightly hurt by that fact that nobody thought to bring that up, because I would never have picked up that book up at all if I had known. So next book that I DNF'd is Confessions by Kane Minato. This is about Yuko Moriguchi, who is retiring from being a teacher. This is her last day of school. Her 4-year-old daughter has just died recently, and everybody thinks it's an accident, but she creates this whole narrative for her students, talking about the fact that somebody has killed her daughter. 2 people have killed her daughter, and both of them are students from this class. And so she lays this bomb there and just leaves. And in the future chapters, you're seeing the confessions, or like, the perspective of the 2 murderers plus the parent of one of them. With the like, you're seeing the fallout of what she did that day. But yeah, first off, I just want to say that I think that we as reviewers have a responsibility, whether we want to accept that responsibility or not, to make sure that the people who are going to be taking your recommendation and going to pick up these books have all the information to be making sure that the people who may be picking up these books are making a fully informed decision when it comes to choosing to pick up these books, especially when it comes to things that could actually cause harm for that reader. And so after I read this first chapter, which is like 54 pages long, I was reading like review after review after review, and I had just recently saw so many people on YouTube talking about this book, and not a single person talks about the first thing that really just like took me out of the reading, and I was just like, whoa, why did nobody bring this up? It's like I get that some people may not catch it, and it's like I recognize that, but the fact that out of all the hundreds of people that reviewed this book and read this book, that they didn't, no one noticed it. Like I can't understand. Like if I noticed it, somebody else has to have noticed. I can't be the only one that saw this. And why did nobody bring it up? So this one actually really hurt me a little bit, that not a single person actually like brings this aspect up. It's problematic, and it could possibly cause harm to somebody reading this book. So the first problematic aspect is the fact that this author brings in this whole HIV/AIDS discussion with the fact that Moriguchi's boyfriend and the father of her child is HIV positive, but the way that she talks about it is, it's just, it feels like the author is not fully informed about HIV. It's this constant feeling of needing to blame him, like it's his fault for getting HIV, which no. And also, what kind of bothered me about Moriguchi is the fact that she said that she hated him for doing this. Like, he actively made a choice to go out and get HIV. And it's like, I would understand hating him if he had purposely hid from her the fact that he had HIV, but he didn't even know until he got a physical that same year. So, like, when he found out, she found out. Like, it's just, it really rubs me the wrong way, the way that this author is bringing up and dealing with the topic of HIV. It just, and then the fact that Moriguchi later on, when she meets up with him again, she says he finally is showing symptoms. Like she wanted him to have symptoms. It's just like all sorts of like things. And yes, people could interpret this a little bit differently, because it's kind of like gray, because like I do feel like the author Moriguchi kind of like recognizes that it's problematic the way that people treat HIV, etc. But the fact is that she's also being problematic in the way that she's talking in this class in itself too. So anyways, but the other thing that I feel like, even kind of like maybe like a slightly grander scale, is like the open transphobia that I see in this book. So on page 9 and 10, she's like, a little bit of background, like she's talking, Moriguchi is telling the students about how, like, when the cell phones and texting became a thing, that they would constantly get these texts from students saying things like, I want to die, or I need help, things along those lines. And then this whole drama like came up because a teacher got a text asking for them to go to this hotel, and it was a kind of like a questionable hotel, probably where sex workers would take their would, I don't know the right word, but like that's what I'm getting, that it's a place for sex workers, and so they get a picture taken, and then there's this whole drama that plays out. But what bothers me is the constant misgendering of this teacher. So let me just read this. Hold on. Oh no. Actually, I figured this out. Sorry, between pages 11 and 12. So if you're, so it says here that we knew. So she's also saying that the teachers knew that it couldn't be, which I'm just like, well, just because this teacher is a woman doesn't mean anything. Like, you do not know what her sexuality is. They could be non-binary too. Like, this is like, so Moriguchi says, we knew because misgendering had told us that misgendering was transgender. Misgendering had been born with the body of a man, but misgendering was actually a woman. So like, it's like this Moriguchi, the author, recognizes the fact that this person identifies as a woman, but constantly misgenders them. And later on the next page, it says, misgendering was transferred last year and teaches at another school now as a woman. Like, I don't know if I'm reading too much into this, but it feels very much like Moriguchi and very possibly the author is saying that it's like a costume or something. Like, it feels like they're saying that no matter the fact that they say that they're a woman, that they look like a woman, that they're not really a woman. And I'm just like, out of all the people that I heard talk about this book and saw and read reviews from people, how do they not like notice this? Like, I'm like, out of the hundreds and thousands and hundreds, not a single person talked about this aspect. So it really like took me out of the book, and it really bothered me. I was just so upset about this because this is could be harmful, and it's hurt me, and I'm not even trans myself. Like, I just, this wouldn't affect me, but it hurts to know that this book has this in here and not a single person brought this up. Like, we have a responsibility, right? So like, I'm just very confused because I recognize again that possibly people may not have noticed this, but that many people, I can't be the only one that saw that problematic aspect. And I feel again that we have a responsibility. So I'm not trying to be like mean or over criticizing of people who read this book. I just think that especially if you're reviewing this book, we have a responsibility. Again, I'm going to reiterate this like 100 times, that we have a responsibility to make sure that people who are going to be picking this book up are fully informed on what they're going to be reading, so that they, if that aspect of the book could possibly cause them harm, that they will protect themselves. It just, it really, it's really disappointing. But I did find out that this was made into, a movie. So I might just watch the movie. Hopefully we won't see any of that problematic aspect in the movie. And hopefully I will enjoy that, because the premise of this book is good. I was really, if I could have, like, if those two problematic aspects, especially the transphobia in this book, had not been in this, I would have continued on reading this book. So I want to write, hopefully I can find a copy of the film so I can watch it. But yeah, the next book that I actually finished was Anne of Avonlea, the second book in the Anne of Gill series by Ella Montgomery. I will say that in reading this book now, I can recognize that this is not my favorite out of the 5 core books that I do read regularly, and that I don't really like the introduction of Davy and Dora. I find that Davy is kind of like a bad, misbehaving brat, and that Anne and Marilla constantly are making excuses for him, in a way that it's just like, no, you can't be making there's just no way to excuse this behavior. Like, there's one specific chapter where Davy locks Dora in a shed and leaves her locked in there almost all day, and he watches while Anne and Marilla are going frantic trying to find where she is, thinking that she like fell into the well and things and such. And then finally they find her, and not once does he even like fess up and like tell them. They actually end up going to where the shed is and figuring it out for themselves that they're there. And he knows that he did wrong because he goes and runs and hides. So it's not even that like he didn't know he was doing wrong. It's the fact that he did know that he was doing wrong, but he just didn't know. Like, he didn't have the discipline. He didn't have the parenting to be like, to understand that, even though, like, I get that he didn't have parenting at all, basically. But the fact that Anne literally said that he wasn't being a bad boy in that situation, I'm just like, yes, he was. He knowingly locked her in that shed and left her there to sit there in the dark and being scared all day, knowingly and willfully. There's no excuse for that kind of behavior, and he knew it was wrong, and he was being, the constant excuses that they make for Davy when he like does bad things, it's like, And like he does get better because he does get disciplined, and they do teach him. Um, but yeah, also the one thing that really bothers me the most is the constant uh, comparison between Davy and Dora. They're twins, which I feel like Montgomery fell into the trap of the stereotype about twins. And then it's this whole constant comparison because Davy is uh, more rambunctious, more like vocal about his love and expressing his love to Anne and Marilla, whereas Dora is more reserved, more quiet, and she shows her love through doing acts of kindness. Like that's how she shows it. And there's this constant comparison and saying that they love Davy more. I'm not supposed to have favorites, but that Davy is their favorite because I'm just like, ooh, no. So like this is my least favorite, especially because Davy and Dora, especially Davy, is like the central, like it takes up a lot of pages in this book. But overall, I do still enjoy it. Like I enjoy seeing Anne as a teacher, seeing those little funny moments that still are there where she gets herself into a bit of a scrape still, and seeing her meet Miss Lemmerger, who is like the sweetest person on this planet, in this book. So like overall, I really enjoyed it this book, but it's definitely not my favorite anymore. Now into the books that I'm currently reading. Obviously, I am continuing on with my reread of the Anne books. I'm halfway through Anne of the Island by Ella Montgomery. I am like halfway through, and she's just about to start her second year in college. And yeah, there's another chapter where it's centered on Davy, and I don't really understand the point of that because this book is really centered on Anne being in college and stuff, and like Albany is not a central part in this book and Anne's story anymore. So it's really like frustrating to me that we had to have that chapter. So I always skip that chapter. But overall, I really love this book. Definitely, like I would say that End of Anne's House of Dreams, Anne of Green Gables, Anne of Windy Poplars, this one, and then Anne of Ollie. I don't know. Maybe that will be different when I actually read. But the one thing that kind of like frustrates me, like I get it. We all had our childhood dreams and visions of things, but we usually are able to just grow out of them and like recognize that those were like something that our child self is. But she's holding so stubbornly on this idea of what her future husband is supposed to look like and act like, and she's like, Gilbert doesn't fit it. But the reality is that you grew out of that, and Gilbert is now more fitted to who you are as an adult. So it's just was kind of like frustrating how strongly and stubbornly she held on to that childhood vision, an ideal of a man. So, but I absolutely really do enjoy that. I'm also working my way through The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. I'm going to be taking my time with this. I have to remember that with nonfiction, you have to like read it differently. You have to go about it differently than reading fiction because nonfiction takes a lot more energy. It got a lot more information, and especially if you want to be able to digest what you're reading and really get the information that you're being given, you need to not put the pressure to try to finish it in a certain amount of time or read a certain amount of pages or whatever. Like I just kept changing how. So like now I'm just gonna try to read 50 pages a day, or at least 100. At least try to read an hour a day because I've been following along while listening to it, which has been very helpful for me. So I am 204 pages. Yeah, 204 pages into this. So hopefully I will get further in, or at least maybe possibly done this week. I don't see that with me reading just 50 pages, but for the rest of this time, but you never know. Also, this is so much. Like it's amazing that we never learned about this at all. Like I never even knew that there was such a mass migration. Very short, like I think it was talks about this. It's this mass migration is, you could compare it to people leaving their countries, like Ireland. Like you could compare it to those leaving Ireland to going like people will say like, oh, they leave. Okay, here it is. It says the bulk of migrants prefers a short journey to a long one. The more enterprising long journey migrants are the exception and not the rule. And there's this theory that due to human pragmatism and inertia, migrating people tend to go no further from their homes in search of work than is absolutely necessary. And this is Ravenstein. But Southern blacks were the exception. They traveled deep into far-flung regions of their own country and in some cases clear across the continent. Thus, the Great Migration had more in common with the vast movements of refugees from famine, war, and genocide in other parts of the world, where oppressed people, whether fleeing 21st century Darfur or 19th century Ireland, go great distances, journey across rivers, deserts, and oceans, or as far as it takes to reach safety with the hope that life will be better wherever they land. And that is exactly what people in the South, black people in the South, were doing. They had this hope and this wish that for the North to be better for them. And so many people, they were leaving for survival. It wasn't even that they really, not all of them wanted to even leave. They just knew that they had to leave. Also, we're seeing how Jim Crow not only caused in a lot of ways this migration, but it also is like the step in the ladder towards the civil rights movement. We're seeing how Jim Crow caused so many people to be forced to leave, but then you're also seeing how people who either left and came back, whether because they couldn't financially make it work in the North, or situations with their family in the South caused them to be drawn back, or because they went into war and then coming back, they see this like they saw what could be, and so they're starting to chafe against their cage, and rightfully so. And so either they end up officially migrating to the North and staying there, or you're seeing that this is going to be the lead up to the civil rights movement. And also, you're also seeing how people in the North are writing back to their families and friends saying, like, look, this is what the North is offering us. This is how we're living. Like, we have a lot more freedom. And when you have had barely like no freedom at all, any little freedom is going to look like a lot of freedom, I will also say. But like, you're seeing how this is planting the seeds towards what will lead up again, like I was saying, to the civil rights movement. It's just interesting to see how this is all playing out and leading up, and like there's all these like small and big things that are going to be combined to lead up to big and massive changes in the future. And we're also seeing the impact a little bit right now. We'll see it further on in a bigger ways, I think, on the South when it comes to how so many people have left the South, and it's causing a labor shortage. And it kind of like cracks me up a little bit, because I'm just like, what did you expect? What did you fucking expect? I mean, anyways, so it's like obviously money speaks for itself, and the fact that they had no labor, which means that they were not going to be able to get money, was kind of what the driving force towards the changes that you're going to see in the future. So yeah, there's just a lot of information, a lot of things, and it's really just kind of like, it's disgusting how we did not hear about this. Like this is like, when I learned about this book, that was the first time I ever even heard about a mass migration. So, and we all know that they try to oppress it. So I'm really appreciative of this book. I will also say that what I really appreciate a lot is how she writes this book, and the fact that she is focusing on three people and their families, and you're seeing how what their lives were like in the South, what caused their decision to migrate, and then in the second part you're seeing the actual migration, and then in the third part I believe you'll be seeing the after effects of it. What was their life in the North like? How did it affect the South? How did it affect the North, etc.? And through it all, in between these chapters, you're also being shown the historical context and the background to what precipitated and pushed and drived a lot of these changes and the migration itself. Things that these families wouldn't even have known that played a part in their choice to leave. So it's just really like so much is being given here. And I must say, I'm going to say this, reading books that talk about our history, especially our true history, is very important and very vital. We see this, how cycles just keep on replaying and recycling over and over again, and a lot of that comes from the fact that we are not being educated and told the truth about our history. And if you are not willing to do the work to educate yourself, we're just gonna keep on going through those cycles over again. It's never going to be able to be broken. We need to educate ourselves. We need to be able to do our part to help break that cycle, and especially if you really want to be part of that process, we need to continue to educate ourselves, grow, especially if we want to be better allies and accomplices and friends, etc. We need to be able to check our biases and our assumptions, etc. at all times, and a lot of that plays a part in what you're reading and how you're educating yourself, etc. So it's very vital. I feel very important, and I feel very compelled to talk about that because I feel a lot of people say, I don't like history. I'm like, well, you know what? Our history plays a huge part in how our present and future is going to be. You need to care. You may not like it, but you have to at least care, right? So anyways, those are the 2 books that I am currently working my way through. I'm hoping, if I go the way that I'm hoping to go with my reading this week, I want to read 2 more books. The first one I want to try to get to is The First Sister by Lyndon A. Lewis. I'm not really going to talk about what these are just because I have been talking long enough and I need to really get going. But I think this is like sci-fi fantasy, and it's about these 3 people who are going to rise up against their oppression in some ways. The next one is another nonfiction, but this is shorter, so hopefully I will be able to get through this a little bit easier than with the other sons, and that is When Breath Becomes Air by Cullen. I might actually change my mind about this now that I'm thinking about it, because I don't know if I want to read a nonfiction at the same time that I'm reading another nonfiction. So I might switch this up for another book if one of my holds comes through before I get to this one. But this is about a doctor. I said I wasn't going to talk about what these books are, and I'm talking about them. But anyways, this is about a doctor who gets diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and he's writing about his experiences with the diagnosis, with the process of trying to fight against, I believe, and what his life was like. But apparently, he died in March 2015 while working this book, so it's not fully finished. Which I think, like, the fact that the book is really about him actually fighting and trying to deal with what this diagnosis did and affected his life, etc. That whether he lived or not, that is kind of like, this book is kind of like finished if you think about that in that way. So anyways, I'm looking forward to eventually picking this up, whether this week or next week. I don't know if I want to read it again on the same week that I'm reading another nonfiction. We shall see what I decide. By the way, that is all. That took me a lot longer than I was planning because I kept like messing up. But these are all the things that I talked about. I would love to hear your thoughts, especially on Confessions and my discussion on the problematic aspects in that book. What your thoughts on that are, and why do you think that nobody's been talking about that? So yeah, I would love to hear what you've been reading. Hopefully your week has been better reading wise than mine, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching.